Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you once again. My name is Geraldine Mugumya. I'm a volunteer for the ISC2 Uganda chapter, and I welcome you again to the August webinar, which will be on the relationship between the ISO 27001 and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Just a little bit for someone who this is your first time joining our webinar, about the chapter is that it's a young and energetic chapter that it has been dedicated to growing the information security skills and knowledge built among its professionals within Uganda. For our dear participants, please use the Q&A chat box. It's below your screen to ask any questions during the course of this webinar. This webinar is going to be recorded and it's going to be uploaded onto our YouTube channel later on. So in case you missed out something during the session, please don't hesitate to go to our YouTube channel. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's speakers. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who will be Stella New, who is the head of managed services and the Ugandan branch manager, Sentinel African Consulting. She's an information security expert and is a consultant in business continuity and data protection. Stella is a change agent with over 11 years experience in development, implementing and training in different disciplines, which are related to risk management and process improvement. She is currently the chair lady of Business Continuity Institute Forum East Africa, and she has a wealth of experience and certifications, such as one of the important topics that we're going to talk about, the ISO 27000 lead implementer and auditor, as well as among other certifications. You're welcome, Stella. And our second speaker is Harsh Kamani, who is a cybersecurity expert and SOC analyst at Sentinel Africa Consulting. He is a cybersecurity enthusiast focusing on the blue team side of things, and his goal is to be a forensic expert. He currently is an ISO 27000 lead implementer, pen tester, and as well as a seasonal CFP player. Welcome, Ash, as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ash or Stella. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen. Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Geraldine, and thank you for all the participants who have joined in. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm here in Kenya right now, and I was just wondering who is going for lunch, and are we having peanut sauce for lunch, or what are we having for lunch? So Geraldine, I hope after this webinar, we'll be meeting somewhere for some good peanut sauce. So today's topic is an interesting one. A lot of people ask, I am in my organization is big, my organization is small, or, whenever I am audited, I seem to fall short of the expectations, and I seem to have a lot of gaps. So you may be asking yourself, how can I make my environment much better? And one of the things you can do is to leverage on frameworks. So today we are going to just be giving you an introduction of ISO 27001, as well as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. We will be discussing, where do they interact, where do they deviate from each other, and also some of the challenges you might have when you're implementing these frameworks. So welcome to the webinar. And I will just start off by giving an introduction of Sentinel. So Harsh, you can go to the next slide. So we like to introduce ourselves as the only risk management consulting firm in Kenya or in Africa that is purely risk focused. And what that means is that we help organizations who are trying to set up a second line function. What we do is help you to protect your value and grow your value. And we do that with offices in Kenya. We have one in Uganda. We are at Acacia Mall, as well as Kigali, Rwanda. So do feel free to reach out in case you would want to engage with us further to find out a bit more about what we do. So we can go to the next slide. So this is just a run through of our main products. And for us, we focus on the lines of defense in regards to information security, data protection, enterprise risk, and business continuity. And we do that by having implementations with your organizations. We have managed services where we provide different things, like, for example, SOC services to our clients, as well as train our clients on these best practice frameworks. So this is just a snapshot of what we can do and how we produce value to you. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I had run through the objectives, but basically what we're going to do today is understand the need for a framework. So why do we actually need to put in a framework? What exactly is a framework? And what does a framework enable me to do that other things don't enable to do? We'll give you an overview of the standard. Now the standards are quite long, but we have compressed it into one slide. Yes, we are those magicians. So we'll be able to give you a snapshot view of the two standards, just to help you know what does the standard talk about. And then we'll be able to talk about how they are distinct, but yet complementary. So should you implement NIST? Should you implement ISO 27? We'll be able to maybe have a bit of that discussion and then look at the benefits of integration. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So we'll just start off by explaining what a framework is. And I'm sure for some of you on the call, you have undergone, or you have decided, today I want to build my house. But you think about building your house and you think about, what are the things which I need to do to build my house? So you think about, first of all, I need an architect, then I need masons, I need to have the proper materials, I need to have money, I need to have support from various people. So in the same way, we have frameworks that provide a structured and organized approach towards implementation of set methodologies. So you have a complex task and you want something to be able to guide you. You will follow a particular framework. So it provides a conceptual structure that helps you as an individual, you as an organization, navigate that complex task and make informed decisions so that at the end, you're able to get your desired outcome. Now with cybersecurity, your desired outcome is one, that you're able to reduce the number of successful attacks, that you're able to have a structured approach towards implementation of a cybersecurity framework, that you're able to be more proactive rather than reactive. So your framework should be delivering that for you. Okay. So why is it important? Often if you were to, going back to the example of building a house, if you were simply to start building a house without a particular framework that you're following, without a particular plan that you're following, you might reach the 8th floor and discover that your foundation was weak because you did not think through it before you started off building. In the same way, if you build your house or your organization without a particular framework, you are not able to assure your organization that it is fully covered for the risks with which it faces. So aligning to a particular framework helps you to be more efficient, helps you to make sure that your implementation is systematic, and basically helps you embed continuous improvement and participation by the whole, the organization. Okay, so while specific frameworks will vary, you'll find that there are key components that are repeated across different frameworks. So we're going to see, as we look at the two frameworks, that there are a lot of similarities, and we build on these similarities. And where, for example, a framework is more detailed, we can always borrow from that. So we can go to the next slide. So what are some of the things that you'd expect from your cybersecurity framework? So first of all, you would expect that they are core functions or core domains. So for ISO 27, we have the people controls, the technology controls, the physical controls, and the organization controls that are core to implementation of ISO 27. On the NIST side, you're going to see that they have organized, it has been organized according to the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. I think, Hash, you can just populate all of them. I won't go through all of them in detail, but a few. The other thing that you can expect is that risk assessment and risk management is at the heart of it. And what I usually say is, from a day-to-day perspective, you will find that every day you leave the house, you make decisions towards the risks you're going to take and the risks you need to mitigate. So from the fact that you might say, I need to be at work on time, and because I need to be at work on time, I need to be able to plan that out. How do I make sure that I am at work on time? So you are practicing the discipline of risk. So in the same way, all frameworks tend to be risk-based, because again, we can't, the context is different. And at all junctures, we will find that we are faced with different types of risks. So how do we, first of all, understand the risk? So by understanding the risk, we are looking at assessing those risks. And then how do we then go and manage the risks? Now, in managing the risks, we depend on controls. So which controls should we put in place? How much are they going to cost? And what are we going to do about them? You'll find that all frameworks focus on, fine, you have done all these things, but maybe we have an incident. How do we then respond to the incident? How do we recover? And that will require us as an organization to communicate, to collaborate, to have the relevant resources, to have people trained so that we are able to, respond and recover. It focuses on measuring as well. So how do we know where we are, and how do we know how we can improve? So you'll find that the various frameworks focus on telling you, measure in terms of your incident management, how long is it that it's taking you to close an incident? In terms of training, how many people have been trained? How many are not training? How many people are, when you have a phishing test, how many people actually fail the phishing test? All those are elements of measurement and metrics. And the last element there, which is compliance with regulation, is critical. So how do I make sure that the framework I am following then enables me as an institution to comply with the relevant regulatory framework? Harsh, we can go to the next slide. So just as I had mentioned in the beginning, there are various frameworks. Now, there is ISACA, the cultivate, there's NIST, there's PCI DSS, there is ISO 27. So which framework do I choose? Now, when we look at this model, it has mapped the framework in terms of the breadth of coverage and then the specialization. So there are some frameworks which are narrowly focused, and then they cover fundamental concepts. So like, for example, PCI DSS covers security of card environments. So you'll find that very many banks, very many institutions which accept cards as a payment mechanism will then comply with PCI DSS. Now, if you look at a framework like ISO 27, the applicability is wide, meaning that it applies to various types of organizations, and the breadth of coverage is also quite comprehensive. So you can see that whether you're a school, whether you're a bank, whether you're a government institution, ISO 27 is going to cover you. Then we have NIST, which is less applicable, but quite comprehensive. And we're going to see some of the things, or just a snapshot of how that is. So we can go to the next slide. So what's the key definition between ISO 27 and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework? So ISO 27 is short for ISO 27001:2022, and it's an international standard. So it was created basically to provide a systematic and structured approach for organizations to establish, implement, and maintain and continually improve an information security management system. Now, key to note is that ISO 27 starts off with information security, while NIST looks at cyber security. So you'll find that ISO 27 covers not just the cyberspace, but cyber as well as general information. So you'll find even in terms of the controls, it has catered for an environment that is not very automated, because it looks at information not just as information in cyberspace, but all types of information. So an ISMS basically gives you a framework of the policies, the procedures, the resources you need, the management involvement to manage your information security risks and protect sensitive information. So on the other hand, NIST was developed by the National Institute of Standards. It's comprehensive and it's voluntary, and it provides best practices at enhancing cybersecurity and managing cyber risks within the organization. So NIST is very particular to cyber risks. So the difference between cyber risks and information risks is that cyber risks covers information in cyberspace. So any information which is sent through computers, through email, through any, so it has to be on the cyberspace. So the framework basically provides a structured approach for organizations to assess, manage, and improve their cybersecurity posture, regardless of size, industry, or sector. So we can go to the next slide. So what are the key differences? So as we have seen, ISO was developed by it's basically an ISO standard. So it was developed by the International Organization of Standardization, and it's globally recognized, while NIST on the other side was initially intended for US organizations, and it was developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Then the scope, basically it's applicable, ISO 27 is applicable to organizations of all sizes, industry, and sectors, while ISO 27 also focuses on establishing, implementing, and maintaining an information security management system. So NIST, on the other hand, was developed for critical infrastructure sectors. Remember, we said cyberspace. So it has been broadened to be applicable to be a wide range of organizations. It emphasizes risk management, incident response, and cybersecurity best practices. Then what's the structure of each? So ISO 27 is organized in what you call clause 4 to 10. And then it has Annex A, which now has 93 controls in 4 control groups. While on the other side, NIST has 5 core functions of identify, protect, respond, recover. And basically under each of those it has over 1,000 controls that guide organizations in managing cybersecurity risks. ISO 27 puts a strong emphasis on risk assessment, and it requires organizations to identify and assess information security risks and implement controls, while NIST on the other side also looks at a risk management approach. We can go to the next slide. So from an incident response, ISO 27 includes a guidance on incident management and response, and cybersecurity devotes, or rather cybersecurity, the NIST framework, basically has devoted an entire core function to incident response. So it talks about how to plan, how to communicate, how to analyze, and also how to mitigate risks. From a customization and flexibility, ISO 27 allows organizations to customize controls and implementation based on their specific risk profile. So you'll find that the ISO 27001 will give you, this is the controls that are required. For example, access control. It will not tell you, in terms of access control, do 1, do 2, do 3. While on the other side, NIST provides a framework that can be tailored to an organization's needs, risk tolerance, and specific sector. Then in terms of a maturity model, basically ISO 27 looks at continuous improvement through the PDCA cycle. What is the PDCA cycle? It's a plan, do, check, act. And the NIST has a very specific maturity, which ranges from partial to adaptive. Then from a regulatory framework, ISO 27 has been adopted by many regulators to enhance compliance. So for example, I know the Bank of Uganda requires all banks to actually certify against ISO 27. While you might find other regulators here in East Africa basically say, implement according to ISO 27. So NIST on the other hand, basically is mainly developed for US critical infrastructure. So we can go to the next slide. So now I'll just give an overview of ISO 27. So we have highlighted the 2022 standard. So you may be aware of the 2013 standard. And actually what happens to, basically standards is that they are regularly reviewed to make sure that they still remain applicable. So the ISO 27 underwent a review in 2022. And out of that review, a number of things were changed. So the first thing is that the PDCA, so the PDCA is just plan, do, check, act, remained more or less the same. What the plan, do, check, act ensures is that from an organizational perspective, first of all, I plan. So I look at your context, and I look at what regulatory requirements do you have. I look at your leadership. I see what involvement do I need from them. I set targets. In terms of objectives, what do I want to achieve in terms of this information security? So in terms of planning, those are some of the elements that are done in the ISMS. Then I go ahead and I implement the standard. In implementation of the standard, I identify my risks. I put in place controls. I make sure the controls are working. And we have something called the statement of applicability that is key in terms of guiding the implementation. Now, the statement of applicability covers the controls we can see here on the outside circle. So things like human resource security, asset management, asset control, and so on and so forth. Then I check. Now, in checking, I do what is called monitoring and measurement. So if I'm looking at something like information security aspects of business continuity. One of the things I would be interested in is how regular or how successful is my disaster recovery testing. So I would measure and say, for example, the number of tests which have passed per quarter, which will give me an assessment of how good that control is working. If I want to talk about something like asset management, I would measure, update of assets and regular updates. Now, from my measurement and from things like audits, I would be able to take improvement. So the act is all about improving my processes, improving my environment in line with the other plan, do, and check cycles. So I would want to invite Harsh, who will take us through an overview of NIST as well as the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Stella, for that. I'll take over here to explain or give you an overview of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Now, as Stella said, ISO looks at the controls and processes from an organizational, technological, or a people perspective. NIST, on the other hand, it offers a methodical approach on how organizations choose to evaluate, handle, and enhance their position on cybersecurity. And how they do this is using these 5 areas, which is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. These are the 5 major aspects that NIST looks at. Now, under identify, what the objective is to understand and prioritize the risks based on assets, systems, and data. Under the protect umbrella, it's to implement safeguards that allow you to prevent, detect, and respond to potential threats. Talking about what do you call how access control is given, how are you training, how are you creating awareness within the organization, how is your data protected, things like that. Under the detect section, you are looking to establish mechanisms to identify cybersecurity events and anomalies in a timely manner. So are you able to catch events happening in your organization, on your systems early enough? Things like that. The different tools you'd use in this aspect. Then comes the response. This is under the respond umbrella. We are looking to develop and implement response plans to address and mitigate the cybersecurity incidents. So under the detect umbrella, you're now able to catch those things. Under the respond, you're now able to see how you're going to fight against those, protect yourself against those, things like that. Under the recover umbrella, we're looking to develop strategies to revert back to normal operations in case things went bad, or if you're able to defend yourself successfully, then you're seeing how what happened during that process. Yeah, so basically the NIST framework talks to or allows an organization to know what are their critical assets, what is affected by the security incident. It allows you to then see how have you already protected it or how you can improve upon it. And then once you're there, like once you placed your protection and all that, how are you able to detect anomalies, events, things like that? How are you going to respond? And in case things go bad, how are you going to recover from this? Yeah, so again, as Stella mentioned before, what this framework looks at is maturity standpoint. So probably when a young organization does it, they could be partially compliant or have addressed all these items, which then allows them to develop a plan to go from partial to now adaptive. So what we'll now look at is how ISO 27001 and the NIST frameworks can be combined and used together to improve what you call a security standpoint that you have. So in the advantages of aligning the ISO 27001 and the NIST framework, the first advantage that you have here is that it gives you a comprehensive coverage. That means a lot of the functions that ISO 27000 will help you cover, by default, you cover within the NIST framework, and look at a better maturity and compliant section overall when it comes to either getting certified or just looking at it from an internal perspective. Second is enhanced risk management. Using a combination of both of the frameworks, you are able to make a more thorough assessment of the cybersecurity risks and the information security risks that the organization faces, which means the organization is able to identify the vulnerabilities that it's exposed to. The third advantage that is here is strategic alignment. Using the two frameworks, it allows you to ensure that an organization's cybersecurity initiative are aligned with the business objectives. What the business wants to achieve, the frameworks to come in and complement them. Then is flexibility and adaptability. The NIST framework has a flexible structure. Like it said, it's not mandatory, but it allows you to choose what you want to do, or you are able to tailor it to your needs. That means that it's easier for you to implement that structure. On the other hand, ISO 27000 is easily adaptable. And using a combination of the two, you create a more, what do you call, protected environment when it comes to the cybersecurity risks that you're looking to avert. And the next advantage we have is efficient resource allocation. Now, since you're integrating two different standards, or even if you're implementing one of the standards, you now know what resources you want to allot when it comes to budget, manpower, all these things. You now know which areas that you're more exposed to are of high risk, and thus you're able to now visualize where the certain resources need to go. The next advantage we have here is regulatory compliance. Now, as we've mentioned before, ISO 27000 is required by different, depending on the area in, it could be a requirement. And using that in combination with NIST puts your organization at a better standpoint or a better position than an organization that has either done NIST alone or ISO 27001 alone. The next advantage that we have is the communication that the standards require you to have to tell your employees, understand why cybersecurity is important. It looks at it from a top-down perspective where everyone needs to understand why cybersecurity is important, how you are affected by it, and in return, how you help us avert certain risks. Then is the next advantage is improved incident response. Using a combination of the two standards, and what do you call like ISO 27001's incident response planning aspect, and the NIST's detection and response function allows an organization to create a more robust and effective incident response plan and capability, which means that at any given point, you're more ready to respond to any threat that an organization faces. Yeah. Then we have continuous improvement. Like we've seen, ISO 27000 uses the PDCA cycle, and NIST has its maturity cycle. Combining the two allows you to visualize the path and see how you can continue improving, continue becoming a more cybersecurity mature environment. The next advantage is the vendor and third-party management. So the integrated approach from the two standards allows one to what do you call, evaluate your third-party relationships with other clients, other organizations, and to see how you can assess them, you can assess yourself on how you communicate, how you do different tasks here. The next advantage is a strengthened cybersecurity culture. Like I said, the two standards create a in-depth communication requirement for within the organization. And because cybersecurity is dependent on each and every individual within an organization, since it comes from a top-down approach of communication of why cybersecurity is important, this leads to that strengthened culture where people understand why it's important, and there's a level of accountability within the organization. The final advantage is a competitive advantage. Like I said, when you have regulatory compliance necessary by certain standards, or if a certain organization is looking to recruit or look at your services, depending on the kind of organization you are, if you have these frameworks in place, you are at what do you call an advantage of gaining business from them or being able to partner with them to better your services or help them improve their services. So these are the advantages that allow you to gain when you've combined both ISO 27001 and the NIST framework. So what we are going to look at are a few examples of how integrating the two standards helps you, or scenarios in which you can integrate the two, and I'll give an example in each case. So first, when it comes to mapping and alignment, so when you combine the two functions, mapping the functions and categories from the NIST framework and the relevant controls from ISO 27001 allow you to identify areas that overlap between the two standards and which align, which means that when you implement one, you implemented a portion of the other one automatically. For example, the NIST framework under the identify function can be mapped onto ISO 27001's risk assessment and control selection process. So that is an example of how when you integrate the two under the mapping and alignment part, they can complement each other. The second one is risk assessment and management. So ISO 27001's robust risk assessment methodology allows one to identify, or an organization to identify, the information security risks that they face, and then align the identified risks with NIST's frameworks, functions, and categories to develop a comprehensive risk management strategy. An example for that is an organization can identify critical assets through ISO 27001's risk assessment, and then apply NIST's protect function to implement the appropriate safeguards which would apply. Now, for incident response planning, ISO 27001's incident response planning guidance allows an organization to develop a structured incident response plan, which can then be enhanced by incorporating NIST's framework under the recommended practices for incident detection and response. An example for this is, in practice, involving or integrating ISO 20001's incident response procedure with NIST's detect and respond functions allows a more robust incident management capability. Then for integration under profiles and customization, creating a cybersecurity profile that combines elements of both the frameworks to suit an organization needs allows that organization to create a more tailored approach from both the frameworks, which is relevant to their risk landscape. So an example of that is for an organization in the financial sector, you could develop a profile that integrates ISO 27001's financial data protection control with NIST's detect and respond functions for a quicker incident response. Yeah, and then for training and awareness, an organization could leverage ISO 27001's emphasis on employee training and awareness to promote education of cybersecurity throughout the organization. You can then enhance this aspect by integrating NIST's guidance on building a culture of cyber security. An example of this is integration or might involve using ISO 27001's training programs to teach employees about information security while incorporating NIST's strategies for fostering a cybersecurity conscious work environment. And a final example of integration is for vendor and third-party management. Now, an organization could utilize ISO 27001's vendor and third-party management controls to assess the practices of external partners in regard to cybersecurity, and then enhance this process by aligning an assessment of certain criteria within NIST frameworks using the protect and detect functions. Now, an example of this is the organization can integrate ISO 27000 and the risk assessment checklist with NIST's criteria for evaluating the third-party security measure, which means what security measures does that third party have in place, and you use ISO 27001's checklist to tick off that box. Yeah. Now we look at the challenges and certain considerations you can take into account when you combine the two frameworks. So first, since both of the frameworks are quite comprehensive when it comes to its components and areas, this means that there is a lot of area to cover. Yes, even though when you cover a certain aspect of one, another side of the other framework is covered, there's still a lot on both sides that is not similar. Yeah. Second is, since you're integrating two frameworks, you will not go to deploy both frameworks at the same time, right? You have one and you'll integrate another one to improve your posture, which means more time is required, more effort from the organization, employees, stakeholders and all that, and more resources is required. Again, another challenge is, since it's a quite comprehensive framework in both aspects, you require adequate understanding of both the frameworks and training when it comes to the successful integration, which means that you will not have two separate teams trying to combine the thing. You need to have one team who are familiar with both frameworks so that it's easier to integrate. Then while customization is an advantage, it can also lead to complexity, because what you may seem, or when you're building or you're customizing to your needs, you may not necessarily take into account, or you may start taking into account a lot of things that may not apply. So now when you pick one from one framework, you then see that it's also on the other side, or it's not there. So a lot of complexity starts coming in. Another challenge is cultural shift. When you're integrating two frameworks, it can cause a shift on how things are practiced, seen within an organization. Like we've seen, ISO 27001 deals with information security, and NIST deals with cybersecurity. Yes, there is an overlap, but how things are done are different. So you might see that it might take a while for you to move people to adapt to both frameworks, and it definitely has its time that it takes. Now, both frameworks require documentation and reporting in their own way, which means that if you're doing an integration of the two, you have to consider on how each aspect is being reported or being documented. And since you're covering two frameworks, this again takes more time. Then integrating the frameworks may require adjustments to existing cybersecurity processes, policies, procedures. Again, how things are done, how things are being done, all this matters on how you're already doing it, which means alignment can take a while. Then another challenge is scalability and adaptability. While frameworks are designed to be adaptable in nature, scaling these this integrated approach comes with its own challenges. Then when it comes to compliance, now integrating frameworks may involve aligning with multiple regulatory standards. So if you look at NIST, it also has requirements for you to not just ISO 27001, it also talks to a lot of other standards, COBIT and such. So if depending on the industry you are in, again, that integration takes, like I said, time, toll, resources from the organization. Then when it comes to maintenance and updates of both frameworks. Now, since you're going for, or if you choose to go for an integrated approach, what you will see is that these standards evolve, certain things change, which means that the team, or what do you call, people need to be up to date on how things are changing and how they can get ahead of this when things do change. Like ISO 27001 2013, there's a what do you call, a change when it comes to the 2022 version. So when you look at it that way, how are you going to transition from one to the other, especially when compliance or regulatory requirements are involved? Another challenge is what do you call, communication and collaboration from people within. Now, since again, like we said, it's quite an extensive approach when integrating the two, how you communicate, how you make sure that they understand this integration is taking place or their role in it, can be quite challenging, since both use different approaches, different methodologies as such. And finally, ensuring that the assessments remain consistent and are aligned with vital, what you call, accurate risk management, which means that even though you are looking at two different standards, you need to understand how that risk assessment from both aspects is taking place, how you're addressing those risks. Yes. So that is it from me. We can now have some questions from our participants that we can answer for you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stella and Harsh, for that rich and informative presentation. I believe that attendees have really grasped just the relationship between these two cybersecurity frameworks. So for questions, there's one that has come through. So I know, Stella, you wanted to answer this. It's on what are the key improvements in the version of 2022, ISO 27000 2022, that are not in 27001 2013. Maybe we'll start off with you, Stella.
All right, thank you, Geraldine. And that was an excellent, excellent question. So something interesting has happened to the 2022 version of the standard. Now, as organizations were implementing and were certifying against the standard, what, as you implement and as you certify, you give feedback to ISO, and that feedback then gets incorporated into a need for a review. So some of the feedback that was given to ISO was that there were a lot of overlapping elements that could be combined to make the implementation much more easier. So first things first, in terms of Annex A, we had 114 controls, but right now we have 93 controls. The second thing was that there were some emerging issues. So as we've taken you through the presentation, the ISO 27001 was mainly covering information security. But what that meant is that elements of cyber security as well as privacy were not being felt, basically. So the standard was revised to cover elements of information security, cyber security, as well as privacy. And we saw certain controls being included. Those controls include things like threat intelligence, information security for cloud services, data masking, data leakage, configuration management. So there are some controls which have been introduced. There are some controls which have been collapsed to make it easier. The control domains are also new. So rather than looking at controls the way they were previously, they are now 4 clauses, and the controls have been organized in terms of people controls, organizational controls, technological controls, and physical controls. So with that approach, you can be able to know, where am I failing the most? Am I failing on my people-related controls? Am I failing on my tech controls? Am I failing on my physical controls? So those were some of the changes from a clause 4 to 10, which I always say are the strategic clauses. It remained more or less the same. A bit of clarity in terms of some of the terms, a bit of changes here and there, but more or less the clause 4 to 10 remained the same. But the key changes were related to how the annex, which basically provides control guidance, was organized, and the key elements which were covered.
Thank you for your response, Stella. I'll ask there are 2 questions at the same time. The first question is the NIST framework based on the new draft 2.0? And the second question is, where can we get a free copy of the NIST framework and ISO 27001? on the official ISO website, it appears that these ISO standards are for purchasing, yet these are best practices. So maybe a bit of guidance around that. Yes.
All right. So interesting question. You know, people don't think of ISO standards as copyrighted work, but in terms of you know, how ISO standards are written, there is a lot of involvement from various people. It takes quite a lot of work that goes into it. Just imagine if you are writing a book and then you are being asked by people provide that book for free. You know, it's almost impossible. And ISO is a voluntary organization. So hence the reason why ISO sells those standards, and those standards are copyrighted, which means that if I, or rather myself as Sentinel Africa, I have copies of the standard, but they are for my use. They are not for me to distribute because I don't have that copyright. So with that, I am also respecting their, you know, information security. So the reasons why ISO standards are sold is simply because ISO needs to make money, and ISO has spent a lot of you know, a lot of time just to develop those standards. So they are sold, but ideally their price is not restrictive. You would spend about, you know, $100 or about $163 thereabout to buy an ISO standard. The second question, remind me, Geraldine, the second question.
Oh, it was about the NIST framework based on the new draft 2.0.
So the NIST framework that we have talked about is based on the 1.1 standard. Reason being that, yes, the NIST framework is still in draft. Basically, before a standard is published, we will not have it as the official standard. We will still refer to the one which is still in practice up until it is retired and the new standard is now basically in place. So we still based our presentation on the NIST Framework 1.1.
Hash, I'll direct this question to you. What would be, at Sentinel Africa, what would be considered as a big win in the implementation of frameworks for the customer? And what are the challenges in implementation of these frameworks?
Okay. So the first part is what would be considered as a big win in the implementation of the frameworks for the customer. A big win that you get from implementing either one or two, or integrating the two, is you are now able to visualize risks. You are able to now your policies, procedures, your documentation style, all that is now formalized. All that is now the learning curve for that, for people coming into your organization, is quite shallow. Those are some of the big wins. You're able to do these things, or you're able to identify certain things that are obvious much easily and much quicker. Okay. Even looking at it from just the aspect of you implementing any one of the frameworks, is that you yourself have taken an initiative in how you want to protect yourself, your customers, or your employees from the risks out there. Any information security risk, any cybersecurity risk, you are already proactive about it. Now, to the second part of it, which is what are the challenges during implementation? This depends, especially when it comes in, are you doing it as a compliance, or do you as an organization want to do it, or does it align with your strategic goals? Because what happens is that the mentality that you now come in when doing the work for these frameworks, right? If you're coming at it just because you want to be compliant, you will check off a box because it's asked of you. However, when it comes that you want to do it, or it aligns with your strategic goals, is that not only will you be checking off that box, you'll be seeing it how best to do it. And the challenge during this implementation is understanding where you stand when it comes to this, the implementation part. I hope I've answered that for you.
Thank you, Ash. So we'll take the last two questions, given that we have run out of scheduled time. So the first question is, how does NIST relate to ISO 27032, which is guidance on cybersecurity? Are they similar or do they deviate from each other?
Okay, so how, like I said, NIST, when it comes for you to start, what do you call, adhering to it, it covers quite a few standards. So you'll see that under the identify aspect or the asset management, under that, you'll see that you could use 27001 or a different standard. So how that is that certain aspects of 27032 are still part of or can be picked by NIST, but not all of them. Okay, like the same thing as it applies with 27001. Certain things are covered in 27001 which do relate to NIST. However, you'll find aspects in both that are not in each other. So there's a level of mix and match with the different standards with NIST.
Thank you, Ash. Last question is, this is when someone wants to do an integration. If integration was considered, would that mean while recertifying, do you conduct an audit and get a single integrated certificate, or you still need to run two different audits to receive two certificates?
Okay, I can take that. So I think a clarification that we maybe didn't make was that out of the two standards, only ISO 27 is a certifiable standard. So NIST is not a certifiable standard. It is what you call voluntary. So I can voluntarily, as an organization, take the NIST standard, do a self-assessment, and basically confirm how compliant I am with the NIST framework. On the other side, ISO 27 is a certifiable standard, and it has a certification roadmap, which includes you doing an implementation. And once you have done an implementation up until internal audit, then you invite an independent certification body to come and certify you. Now, the independent certification body is then able to check how well your implementation is. And if it finds it's up to par, then you are able to be conferred a certificate, which you then maintain. So in terms of implementation, and I think maybe I'll answer just another question which I saw. So how do you support transition from one framework to another? The simple answer is what we do at Sentinel Africa is we will come and do a gap assessment of the ISO 27-2013 versus the 2022, pick out the elements that have changed, and be able to see of the elements that have now changed, how have you implemented them in your environment? If you have not implemented them, we'll give you a guideline on how to do that implementation. We'll also be able to take you through the motions of training you on the new standard, of informing your management team about the new standard, of doing things like a management review on the new standard. So at Sentinel Africa, yes, we do help to walk that journey with you from transitioning from the old standard up until the new standard.
Thank you, Stella, for your response. So as we come to the close of this webinar, I'm going to invite Angela, who is our chapter president, to close off and also thank our presenters for today. Angela, are you there?
It's Jerry. Yes, I am. Sorry. I was trying to look for the unmute button. Thank you very much, Jerry, for taking us through this session. And I'd like to really appreciate our panelists today. Stella and Harsh, you've done the topic really good. I think we'll be consulting with you every once in a while. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your knowledge with us, and please accept when we invite you back. It's been quite detailed and quite insightful. So thank you so much. I'd also like to appreciate our participants that were able to make it today. Thank you very much, and we hope that you go back and implement what you've learned in your organizations, in your workplaces, for a more secure workplace or organization at which you're at. This has been in a series of information security frameworks. Last month, we looked at the CIS controls, and today we're looking at NIST and ISO 27001. So we hope it's been quite informative and relatable for you. So Jerry will put in the chat our email. If you'd like to contact us, please do send us an email. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, and then you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for these and more insightful webinars. So thank you very much, and from myself to you, have a great day today and a great weekend coming up. Jerry, over to you.
Thank you all, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Geraldine. I look forward to the GNAT source when I come over.
Definitely, we'll be waiting for you.
All right.
Thank you, Geraldine. Thank you, Angeline.